I sprawled across my bed, flipping through the latest issue of X-Men. The house felt unusually quiet with Mom and Dad gone to the Wednesday night service at church. Downstairs, Alan and his friend Sean were taking turns on the PlayStation, their occasional shouts floating up through the floorboards whenever one of them scored or got knocked out. The comic book wasn't holding my attention like it usually did. Something about being home without our parents made the farmhouse feel bigger, emptier. We lived about a mile outside town, surrounded by cornfields that had just been harvested for the season. Our nearest neighbor was half a mile down the road. I checked my digital alarm clock, 8:37 p.m. Mom and Dad wouldn't be back until after 10. The youth group always hung around after service, and Dad was one of the deacons who locked up. A particularly loud yes erupted from downstairs, Sean celebrating by the sound of it. I turned the page of my comic, trying to focus on Wolverine's latest adventure rather than how dark it was outside my window. The autumn nights came earlier now, and the trees that lined the edge of our property had started dropping their leaves, creating skeletal silhouettes against the night sky. The sound of footsteps thundering up the stairs broke my concentration. My bedroom door banged open without a knock, and Alan stood in the doorway, his face flushed. "Quit messing around, Nate," he said, crossing his arms. I lowered my comic. "What are you talking about?" "The knocking. It's not funny." I sat up, genuinely confused. "I've been up here the whole time." Alan's eyes narrowed. "Someone just knocked on the front door 3 times. If it wasn't you..." "It wasn't," I insisted. "Then who was it?" "Sean and I both heard it." I shrugged, already feeling defensive. This was typical Alan, always assuming I was behind anything unexplained. Maybe it was the wind, or a branch hitting the house. Before Alan could respond, 3 distinct knocks sounded from somewhere downstairs. Not the front door this time, but the back one. Alan's expression changed, his annoyance giving way to uncertainty. "That's the back door." "I can hear that," I said, sliding off my bed. Alan grabbed my arm. "Come on." He practically dragged me down the stairs to where Sean waited at the bottom, a game controller still in his hand. His copper-red hair stood up at odd angles, like he'd been running his fingers through it. "You hear that?" Sean asked, nodding toward the back of the house. "Yeah," Alan said, pushing me ahead of him. "Nate's going to check it out since he claims it's not him." "It's not," I muttered, but followed along anyway. The kitchen was dark. Mom had left the little light above the stove on, casting just enough illumination to navigate without bumping into things. The back door, a heavy wooden thing with a small window at the top, stood at the far end, past the refrigerator. "Go ahead," Alan urged, staying a few steps behind me. I approached the door, suddenly wishing I'd grabbed something to defend myself with. Not that I believed anyone dangerous was out there, but still. My hand hesitated on the doorknob. "Just open it," Sean whispered, even though he'd moved to stand behind Alan. I turned the knob and pulled the door open. Cool night air rushed in, carrying the scent of dying leaves and freshly harvested fields. The porch light cast a weak yellow glow that barely reached the steps. Beyond that was complete darkness. Nothing moved. Nothing made a sound. "See?" I said, turning back to Alan and Sean. "No one's there." "Someone knocked," Alan insisted. We both heard it. As if to confirm his words, a new set of knocks sounded, this time from the living room window at the front of the house. All 3 of us froze. "That's not possible," Sean said, his voice cracking. "We were just in there." "Check outside," Alan ordered me, his own voice not entirely steady. I leaned out the back door, peering into the darkness. "I don't see anyone." "Let's go look," Alan said, pushing past me onto the back porch. Sean followed, and I reluctantly brought up the rear, closing the door behind me. We circled around the house to the front windows. The lights we'd left on in the living room were visible from the yard. Alan checked the bushes beneath the windows while Sean looked toward the driveway. "No one's here," I said after we'd completed our inspection. Just then, another knock came, from a side window this time. We all turned toward the sound. "Someone's messing with us," Sean said, running a hand through his hair again. "It's probably just some guys from school," Alan replied, though he didn't sound convinced. "Trying to freak us out while Mom and Dad are gone." We went back inside, Alan locking the door behind us. The house felt different now, less safe, more exposed. "I think we should turn off the lights," Sean suggested. "Then we can watch from the windows. If someone's out there, they won't be able to see us looking." Alan nodded. "Good idea." He went around switching off lamps while I stood in the kitchen, wondering who could be playing such an elaborate prank. Our house was too far from town for kids to walk out here just to mess with us. With the lights off, the house fell into shadow. The three of us positioned ourselves at different windows. Sean at the front, Alan at the side, and me at the kitchen window that faced the backyard and the woods beyond. I pressed my face close to the glass, squinting to see through the darkness. The tree line stood about 50 yards from the back of our house, a solid wall of oak and maple trees that marked the beginning of the forest that stretched for miles behind our property. As I watched, I thought I heard something. Soft at first, then more distinct. Laughter. It was light, almost musical, and seemed to be coming from the direction of the trees. "Guys," I called quietly. "Do you hear that?" Alan crossed the kitchen to stand beside me at the window. "Hear what?" "Laughing. Coming from the woods." He listened for a moment, then shook his head. "I don't—" Before he could finish, a series of knocks rattled the window directly in front of us. We jumped back. The knocking continued, moving along the wall as if someone were dragging their knuckles across the house's exterior. "What the hell?" Sean had rushed into the kitchen. The knocking circled the house, growing louder, more insistent. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, the walls, the ceiling, the doors. "This isn't funny anymore," Alan said, his face pale in the dim light from the stove. He disappeared into the hall closet, returning with his baseball bat. Sean grabbed a heavy flashlight from the drawer by the sink. "We're going to catch whoever's doing this," Alan declared, though his voice cracked slightly, betraying his nerves. The three of us gathered by the front door as another series of knocks rattled it on its hinges. I looked at Alan, then at Sean. Both tried to appear brave, but I could see the fear in their eyes, the same fear I felt crawling up my spine. "Ready?" Alan asked, his grip tightening on the bat. I wasn't ready at all, but I nodded anyway. "Ready?" Alan asked, his grip tightening on the bat. I wasn't ready at all, but I nodded anyway. Alan yanked the door open, thrusting the bat forward like he was expecting to hit something, or someone. The porch stood empty. The only movement came from dead leaves skittering across the lawn, pushed by the autumn breeze. "There's nobody here," Sean said, shining his flashlight in a wide arc across the front yard. We stepped onto the porch, the wooden boards creaking beneath our weight. The knocking had stopped the moment Alan opened the door, which made no sense if an actual person was behind it. "Maybe we should go back inside," I suggested, rubbing my arms against the chill. A high-pitched giggle floated through the air, cutting through the night silence. All three of us turned toward the sound. "Did you hear that?" I asked. "It came from the backyard," Alan said, already moving down the porch steps, bat still gripped tightly. We rounded the corner of the house. The backyard was dark except for the weak yellow light coming from the kitchen window. Past the yard, the trees at the edge of the forest looked completely black in the night. The laughter came again. It sounded like a kid, playful and high-pitched. It seemed to be coming from the woods. "Someone's out there," Alan whispered. Sean lifted his flashlight, pointing it toward the trees. The light barely reached past the first few feet of leaves. "Probably just kids from school," Sean said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Trying to scare us." "By laughing like little girls?" I asked. The giggling started again, bouncing between the trees like it was coming from multiple directions at once. Sean's expression hardened. "I'm going to catch whoever's doing this." He thrust the flashlight forward and took off running toward the woods. "Sean, wait!" Alan shouted, but Sean was already halfway across the yard. "I see someone," Sean called back over his shoulder. "There's a girl by that big oak tree." I squinted, but couldn't make out anything resembling a person. Sean got smaller as he sprinted toward the tree line. Then, in an instant, he disappeared into the dark. Alan and I stood frozen, staring at the spot where Sean had vanished. For several seconds, we heard him crashing through the underbrush. Then, nothing. "Sean?" Alan called. No response. "Sean?" The woods remained silent. "This isn't funny, man." Alan's voice cracked with genuine panic. I took a step back toward the house. "I'm going to call someone." Something cold wrapped around my ankle. I looked down but saw nothing, yet the grip was unmistakable, like fingers clutching my skin through my jeans. Before I could react, I was yanked forward with incredible force. I fell hard, the breath knocked from my lungs as I hit the ground. My body dragged across the grass, picking up speed as I was pulled toward the trees. "Alan!" I screamed, clawing at the ground, my fingers digging into dirt and grass but finding no purchase. I heard Alan shouting behind me, but his voice grew distant as I was pulled into the woods. Branches and thorns tore at my clothes and scratched my face. I tried grabbing onto tree trunks as I passed, but the force pulling me was too strong. The dragging stopped as suddenly as it had begun. I tumbled to a halt, gasping and disoriented. When I pushed myself up to my hands and knees, I realized I was in a small clearing. Moonlight came through a gap in the tree branches above, making everything look pale blue. A girl stood at the center of the clearing. She looked about my age, maybe a little older. Her hair was so blonde it appeared white in the moonlight, falling around her face in wispy strands that seemed to move, even though there was no breeze. Her skin was almost see-through, and her features, the shape of her eyes, the curve of her nose, reminded me of someone I couldn't quite place. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. Her voice sounded hollow, like it was coming from inside a cave. "Father doesn't want you to know." I tried to speak, but my throat felt constricted with fear. "Know what? Who are you?" She tilted her head, studying me with pale eyes that reflected the moonlight like mirrors. "You already know who I am, Nathan." I hadn't told her my name. "Nate, where are you?" Alan's voice cut through the trees, closer now. The girl looked like she was flickering, like a reflection in disturbed water. "They never wanted to speak of me," she said, her voice fading. "But I won't be forgotten." Branches cracked behind me. I turned to see Alan stumbling into the clearing, his baseball bat still clutched in one hand. "Jesus, Nate! What happened?" He rushed to my side, helping me to my feet. "You just got dragged into the woods. I couldn't catch up to you." When I looked back to where the girl had been standing, the clearing was empty. "There was a girl," I said, pointing. "Right there. She was talking to me." Alan's eyes followed my finger, then returned to my face with a concerned expression. There's nobody here, Nate. We need to find Sean and get back to the house. I let Alan pull me to my feet, my mind racing. The girl had seemed so real, but there was something off about her, something not quite solid. Did you see her before? When Sean ran into the woods, I asked as Alan led me back through the trees. I didn't see anyone, Alan said, pushing branches out of our way. But we need to find Sean. We walked through the woods, calling Sean's name every few steps. The woods felt different now, quieter, like something was waiting. The kids' laughter was gone. After what felt like forever but was probably just a few minutes, we got out of the trees and back into our yard. We could see the lights on in our house up ahead. Let's check if he went back to the house, Alan suggested, his voice tight with worry. We jogged across the yard, both jumping at small noises and shadows. The back door stood ajar. We hadn't left it that way. Alan pushed it open wider, gripping his bat with renewed purpose. "Sean," he called as we stepped into the kitchen. A sound came from the living room. Not a response, but a faint rocking motion. We moved cautiously through the kitchen and into the hall. Sean sat on the middle of the couch, his flashlight on the floor beside him. He was staring straight ahead, his face blank. His clothes were dirty and torn in places, with leaves and twigs stuck to his shirt. "Sean?" Alan rushed to him, dropping the bat to grab his friend by the shoulders. "What happened? Where did you go?" Sean didn't respond immediately. His eyes remained fixed on some invisible point across the room. "Sean?" I moved to stand in front of him. "Can you hear us?" His eyes slowly focused on my face. His lips parted, but no sound came out. He tried again. "I don't know," he finally whispered. "I was running, following the laugh, and then... I don't remember." Alan and I exchanged worried glances. "You must remember something," Alan insisted. "You were gone for at least 20 minutes. Sean shook his head slightly. Everything went dark, cold. Then I was walking back to the house. He blinked rapidly, as if trying to clear his vision. "Who was she?" "Who?" Alan asked. "The girl, in the woods." Sean's voice was barely audible. "She said I shouldn't look for her, that it wasn't time yet." I got really scared. "I saw her too," I said, and Alan turned to me, looking surprised. "In a clearing. She had white blonde hair." Sean nodded slowly. "Her eyes, they were wrong. Too bright." "What are you two talking about?" Alan looked between us. "There was no girl. I didn't see anyone." The sound of a car engine interrupted us. Headlights swept across the living room walls as our parents' car pulled into the driveway. "Don't tell them," Alan said quickly. "They'll just think we were messing around or saw a deer or something." Sean and I nodded in silent agreement as the front door opened. Mom came in first, her church Bible clutched to her chest. "Boys, why are all the lights off?" Dad followed, flipping on the entryway light. "Everything all right in here?" Alan clicked on the nearest lamp. "Yeah, we were just, telling ghost stories." Mom looked at us closely, her eyes lingering on Sean's disheveled appearance and my scratched face. "What happened to you two?" "We were playing flashlight tag in the backyard," Alan answered smoothly. "Sean tripped over a root and Nate fell trying to help him up. Dad hung his jacket on the hook by the door. You boys should be more careful. Maybe stay inside after dark from now on." Sean stood up suddenly. "I should go home." "I'll drive you," Dad offered, fishing his car keys back out of his pocket. "It's too late for you to walk." After they left, Mom turned to us with a suspicious look. "Did something happen while we were gone?" "No," Alan said quickly. "Why?" "You both look like you've seen a ghost." I nearly laughed at how close she was to the truth. Just spooked ourselves with stories. She smiled, seemingly satisfied with the explanation. Well, get cleaned up and ready for bed. It's a school night. Over the next few days, I found myself going to the windows that face the woods. I'd stand there for minutes at a time, looking over the tree line. And sometimes, when the light was just right or just wrong, I'd see her. The pale girl with the white blonde hair, standing perfectly still at the edge of the forest, watching our house. "Alan," I called one afternoon as she appeared again. "Look, she's right there between the two big oak trees." Alan joined me at the window, following my pointing finger. "I don't see anyone, Nate." "She's right there. How can you not see her?" He squinted, shook his head. "There's nothing but trees and shadows." I turned to Mom, who was folding laundry nearby. "Mom, come look. There's a girl in the woods." She set down a towel and came to the window, her movements oddly stiff. "I don't see anything, Nathan." "But she's..." I stopped. The girl had vanished. Again, no one believed me. Not Alan, not Mom or Dad. Even Sean avoided the topic after that night, refusing to talk about what he'd experienced in the woods. But I knew what I'd seen. And sometimes, when I was alone in my room, I could swear I heard that same childish laughter, distant but distinct, floating through my window from the direction of the trees. The neighborhood kids raced across the yard, their shouts filling the late afternoon air as they played an elaborate game of tag with rules that seemed to change every 5 minutes. I sat on the porch steps, keeping a watchful eye while pretending to read a book. After finishing college and moving back to help with the family farm, supervising the local children had somehow become part of my routine. "You're it, Lily," shouted one of the boys, tagging the small girl with chestnut curls before darting away. Lily Winters stomped her foot in frustration. "That's not fair! I was just tying my shoe!" "Rules are rules," the boy called back, already halfway across the yard. The afternoon sun made the field look all golden. The trees that marked the end of our property were getting dark. Nobody had seen anything weird in those woods for years, except me. Sometimes I'd still catch something pale moving between trees or hear what sounded like laughing on the breeze. I gave up telling anyone about it years ago when I realized no one else would ever see the stuff I saw. "Mr. Thompson." Lily had abandoned her game and now stood in front of me, her amber eyes serious. "Can I have some water, please?" "Of course." I marked my page and led her inside. "And I told you, you can call me Nate. Mr. Thompson is my dad." She giggled, following me to the kitchen. "My mom says I should be polite." I filled a glass from the tap and handed it to her. "Your mom is right about that." Lily drank deeply, then wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. "Thank you." She looked around the kitchen curiously. "Is your mom making cookies today? It smells like cookies." "Not today. She's visiting my aunt in the city." "Oh." She looked disappointed, then brightened. "I made a new friend yesterday." "Did you?" I leaned against the counter. "One of the new kids in your class?" Lily shook her head, curls bouncing. "No, she doesn't go to school. She lives in the woods." Something cold settled in my stomach. "The woods behind our house?" "Uh-huh." Lily nodded, completely casual. "She has really pretty hair, all white, like snow, and she's very nice." The glass nearly slipped from my hand. I set it carefully on the counter. What did this girl tell you?" "Lots of things." Lily shrugged. "She said she likes watching us play. She gets lonely sometimes." I swallowed hard. "Did she tell you her name?" Lily's forehead wrinkled in concentration. "I don't think so. but she told me a story about a baby. My throat went dry. What kind of story? A sad one. Lily's voice dropped to a whisper. About a little baby that got left in the forest to die. The girl said the baby's daddy carried her out there because she was too sick, and they never came back for her. She looked up at me with solemn eyes. That's really mean, isn't it? To leave a baby all alone? The kitchen suddenly felt too small, the air too thick. Lily, when exactly did you see this girl? Yesterday evening. I was picking flowers near the big trees, and she just appeared. Lily tilted her head. She said she knew you. Are you friends? Before I could answer, the back door swung open. My dad walked in, removing his work gloves. Nate, the Johnston boy is looking for his sister. Is she? He stopped when he saw Lily, his expression softening. Ah, there she is. Your brother's ready to head home, young lady. Lily nodded and handed me her empty glass. Thanks for the water, Mr. Thompson. She skipped toward the door, then turned back. My friend said she'll be waiting, if you want to talk to her too. Dad gave me a questioning look as Lily disappeared outside. New imaginary friend? Yeah, I mumbled. Something like that. I watched through the window as Lily rejoined the group. My mind raced, pulling together fragments from a night 10 years ago. The knocking, the laughter, the pale girl who'd spoken my name in the clearing. You okay, son? Dad placed a hand on my shoulder. You look like you've seen a ghost. The irony of his words wasn't lost on me. I'm fine, just tired. He nodded, clearly not convinced but unwilling to press. I'll be in the barn if you need me. After Dad left, I stood motionless in the kitchen. For years, I'd convinced myself that night had been some elaborate prank or a shared delusion brought on by teenage imagination. Even Sean wouldn't discuss it anymore, and we'd eventually drifted apart after high school. Alan had always maintained there had been no girl in the woods, but now Lily had seen her too. And she knew about a baby. I paced the kitchen, waiting for the children to leave, waiting for evening to settle, waiting for Mom to return. Hours passed like minutes as my mind churned through possibilities, each more disturbing than the last. When I finally heard Mom's car in the driveway, darkness had fallen. Dad was still in the barn, finishing up the day's work. I stood in the kitchen doorway as she entered, her arms full of grocery bags. Nathan, I didn't expect you to still be here. Can you help with these? She smiled, but her expression faltered when she saw my face. What's wrong? I took the bags and set them on the counter without answering. My hands trembled slightly. Nathan? Her voice sharpened with concern. Who's Hannah? I asked quietly. The color drained from her face. The car keys she'd been holding clattered to the floor. What did you say? Hannah, I repeated. The baby in the woods. Mom gripped the edge of the counter, her knuckles white. Who told you that name? Lily Winters saw a girl with white hair by the woods today. The girl told her about a baby that was left there to die. That's ridiculous, Mom stammered, but her eyes darted away from mine. Children have such vivid imaginations. Do they imagine specific details about babies being carried into forests by their fathers? Do they make up stories about families abandoning their sick children? Nathan, please. I saw her too, Mom. 10 years ago, the night you and Dad went to church and left us alone. Alan and Sean saw her too, though they won't talk about it now. I stepped closer. Who is she? And don't tell me she's not real, because I've been seeing her for years. Mom's shoulders sagged. She looked suddenly older, the lines around her eyes deeper than I'd noticed before. Your father will be in soon. We should wait. No. I shook my head firmly. I want the truth now. She closed her eyes briefly, then moved to the kitchen table and sank into a chair. Hannah would have been your older sister. The simple statement hit me like a physical blow. I lowered myself into the chair across from her. I got pregnant before Alan, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. Everything seemed normal at first. Then the ultrasound. The doctors said her internal organs were developing outside her body. A severe case of... I don't remember the technical term anymore. I've tried so hard to forget. She twisted her wedding ring absently, not meeting my eyes. When she was born, it was worse than they expected. They said she wouldn't survive more than a few hours. The pain medication made everything fuzzy, but I remember your father's face when he saw her. Her voice caught. He looked broken. My stomach twisted. What happened? The hospital staff took her away to clean her up. Your father followed them. He was not thinking clearly. When he came back, he told me he couldn't bear to watch her suffer in a hospital room. Mom's eyes filled with tears. He said he'd taken her somewhere peaceful, where she could pass away under the open sky instead of under fluorescent lights with tubes attached to her. I felt sick. The woods. Mom nodded, a tear spilling down her cheek. He never gave me details, just that he'd held her until her breathing stopped, then buried her beneath an oak tree. We named her Hannah but never spoke of her again. When Alan came along the next year so perfect and healthy, it was easier to pretend she never existed. Easier for who? My voice came out harsher than I'd intended. Your father couldn't talk about it. I tried once, and he... She shook her head. The grief nearly destroyed him. When we had you and Alan, he was determined to be the perfect father, to make up for what happened. So you just erased her? Pretended she never existed? We wanted to protect you boys, she said, wiping her eyes. What good would it do to tell you about a sister you never knew? A tragedy that happened before you were born? She looked up at me, her expression pleading. We never imagined she would... return. The back door opened, and Dad walked in, stopping short when he saw us at the table, Mom with tear-streaked cheeks, me with clenched fists. What's going on? He asked, his voice unnaturally calm. She told me about Hannah, I said. His face went blank suddenly. Your mother shouldn't have... Dad, I cut him off. She's still here in the woods. I've been seeing her for years, and now Lily Winters sees her too. He stood still in the doorway, completely shocked. Is it true? I asked. Did you take her into the woods while she was still alive? Nobody said anything for what felt like forever. Then he went to the table and sat down next to Mom. When he talked, he sounded weird, like he wasn't really there. She was in pain, so much pain. The doctors said there was nothing they could do except make her comfortable until the end. He stared at his weathered hands. I couldn't watch her suffer like that. Not in a sterile room with strangers. I wanted her last moments to be peaceful. So you took her to the woods, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. He nodded slowly. I walked until I found a clearing with moonlight. I sat under an oak tree and held her against my chest. I sang to her, the only lullaby I knew, until her breathing slowed and then stopped. His voice broke. Then I dug a grave with my bare hands and buried her there. I marked the spot with stones. Did you ever go back? Dad shook his head. I couldn't. The grief. I had to lock it away. And when you boys came along, it seemed best to leave the past buried. She's been trying to tell me, I said quietly. All these years. The knocking on the doors, the laughter in the woods that night, appearing to me in the clearing. She wanted someone to acknowledge her existence. Mom reached across the table for my hand. Nathan, you can't know that. I do know. When I saw her in the clearing that night, she said, "They never wanted to speak of me, but I won't be forgotten." She was trying to tell her story. The kitchen fell silent except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. Outside, the wind picked up, whistling around the corners of the house. "I need to go to her," I said, standing up. Dad's head snapped up. "What? No." "She's been waiting for someone to acknowledge her, to speak her name." I moved toward the door. "I can do that much for her." "Nathan, wait." Mom stood, her eyes wide with fear. "You can't go into those woods at night." "I'll be fine," I said, reaching for my jacket. "I need to do this. For Hannah." Before they could protest further, I stepped outside into the cool night air. The sky was clear, stars dotting the darkness. I walked across the yard toward the tree line, my breath forming small clouds in front of me. At the edge of the woods, I hesitated. The memories of that night 10 years ago rushed back, being dragged across the ground, branches scratching my face, the pale girl in the moonlit clearing. But I wasn't afraid anymore. "Hannah," I called softly into the darkness between the trees. "I know you're there. I know who you are now." The wind stopped blowing through the leftover leaves. Everything went quiet. "You're my sister," I continued, my voice stronger. "Your name is Hannah Thompson. You were born before Alan and me. Mom and Dad never forgot you, even if they couldn't speak about you." I heard a soft giggle from the trees, the same laugh I remembered from 10 years ago. "I'm sorry you were left alone," I said, taking a step closer to the woods. "I'm sorry no one acknowledged you, but I see you now, Hannah. I know you're there." The air around me seemed to thicken, a presence gathering like mist. I didn't see her, not exactly, but I felt her, a gentle pressure like someone standing just behind my shoulder. "You don't have to stay here anymore," I whispered. "You can rest now. You're not forgotten. I promise I'll remember you." Something brushed against my cheek, the lightest touch, like fingers made of air. The wind picked up again, swirling around me, lifting my hair. Within it, I thought I heard a whisper of thanks, so faint it might have been imagination. Then the presence was gone. The woods were just woods again, dark and ordinary, filled with nothing more mysterious than owls and raccoons. I stood there for a long time, watching the stars through the tree branches. When I finally turned back toward the house, I saw my parents standing on the porch, holding on to each other like they'd just seen a ghost. "Is she gone?" Mom asked as I approached. I nodded. "I think she just wanted someone to acknowledge she existed, to speak her name." Dad wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "All these years." "We should have told you," Mom said, her voice thick with emotion. "We thought we were protecting you, but secrets, they find ways to surface." I looked back at the woods one last time. They seemed different now, not threatening, just a part of our land, a place where memories rested. "We should visit her," I said quietly. "All of us." "Dad, do you remember where—" He nodded, unable to speak. "Tomorrow then," I decided. "We'll go together." The three of us stood on the porch, a family incomplete for too long, finally facing what had been buried. In the distance, the wind rustled through the trees, but there was no laughter, no knocking, no pale girl watching from the shadows. Hannah was at peace,